Daniel Hart rode slowly along the dusty trail, letting his horse choose its own pace while he enjoyed the quiet of the afternoon. The sun was warm but soft, lowering toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. He had spent the morning in town, buying supplies, repairing a broken saddle buckle, and talking with a few neighbors who always seemed to have more to say than he needed to hear. But now, with his tasks finished, he was looking forward to a peaceful ride back to his ranch. It was his favorite part of the day, when the land felt calm and the air felt gentle. As he rode, he noticed birds flying in short, nervous bursts, landing only for a moment before taking off again. It was small, but Daniel had lived on the frontier long enough to know when something was unusual. Animals behaved differently when something had happened nearby. He straightened up in his saddle and gently pulled on the reins, slowing his horse. The trail itself looked normal, just dry earth and faint horse prints from earlier travelers. But Daniel trusted his instincts more than anything else. He leaned forward, resting a hand on the horse's neck, and looked closely at the ground. Something felt off. A few broken branches, a scuffed mark on the dirt, a dropped piece of cloth near a cluster of bushes. Small things, but things that didn't belong there by accident. Daniel dismounted and walked a few steps, touching the cloth. It was worn and dusty, but the edge had a pattern he recognized from Apache weaving. He had seen that style before, on blankets and clothing made by tribes that lived not too far from his land. He looked around slowly. The air felt heavier. Something wasn't right. Daniel took a slow breath and let it out quietly. He had a choice. He could keep riding home, pretending this was nothing, or he could follow the signs and see where they led. Most men he knew would have done the first option. Life was easier when you didn't get involved with trouble. But Daniel wasn't most men. He believed that if someone was in danger and he could help, he should at least try. He tied his horse loosely to a fallen log so it wouldn't wander off and began following the disturbed earth. The tracks were faint, as if whatever happened here had been several hours earlier, but they were still visible to someone who knew how to read them. Daniel walked slowly, listening carefully. The wind pushed through tree branches, and somewhere far off, a bird cried out. Nothing else. The trail led him deeper into a grove of old cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling softly despite the still air. There were more signs here. Footprints, some small, some larger, a few broken twigs, a shoe print he didn't recognize. Something had definitely happened nearby. As he stepped deeper into the grove, he began hearing a sound, very quiet, almost lost beneath the rustle of the leaves. He froze and tilted his head. It wasn't the cry of an animal. It wasn't the wind. It was softer, weaker, almost like a sigh or a faint hum of distress. Daniel's heartbeat changed. He didn't rush. He moved carefully, scanning everything with calm eyes. Whatever the sound was, it came from deeper within the clearing, partly hidden behind thick brush. He pushed aside some branches with his hands and stepped through. At first, he could barely make out shapes in the shadows. It was dimmer here, the canopy blocking most of the sunlight. But then, piece by piece, he understood what he was looking at. 5 Apache girls, young, exhausted, and clearly frightened, were suspended in an uncomfortable position, left behind and too weak to free themselves. It was not cruel in a graphic way, but it was clearly harmful. Daniel felt something tighten inside him, not anger or fear, but a quiet, deep sadness that someone had left them like this. He didn't shout or rush forward. Sudden movements might scare the girls even more. He stepped closer gently, making sure they could see him. His voice was calm, low, and steady, the way he would speak to a frightened horse. "It's all right," he said softly. "I'm here to help you. I'm not going to hurt anyone." The girls looked at him with wide, unsure eyes. They were clearly frightened. He knew they didn't know if he was friend or foe, and he didn't blame them. Most children, would be terrified in their place. Daniel moved slowly, checking the knots. Whoever had tied them hadn't tried to injure them. They simply wanted them out of the way and unable to escape. The girls were tired, dehydrated, and shaken, but not physically harmed. Daniel took great care as he loosened each tie, making sure nothing pulled or caused them any discomfort. He lowered each girl down gently, speaking calmly whenever one of them whimpered or trembled. One by one, they were freed. When the last girl was lowered, Daniel offered them his canteen. He didn't force them to take it. He simply held it out patiently. At first, none of them moved. Then the oldest girl, who seemed to be around 12 or 13, reached for it slowly. She drank a little, then passed it to the next girl, showing a sense of responsibility even in her weakened state. Daniel felt respect rise in him. Even frightened and tired, the children had dignity and care for each other. He looked around the clearing. There were no horses, no men, no signs that anyone else was nearby. Whoever had left them here had already gone. There was no threat now, but there was still a problem. These girls could not be left alone. They were too weak to walk far, and the nearest Apache camps were a long distance away. They needed a safe place to recover. The older girl watched Daniel closely. She didn't speak, but her eyes seemed to ask 100 questions. Why are you here? What do you want? Are you going to leave us? Daniel crouched to her level, keeping his voice soft. I'm going to take you somewhere safe, he said. My home is not far. You'll get food, water, and rest. No one will hurt you. The younger girls moved closer to their older companion, clearly relying on her to understand what was happening. The older girl didn't speak Apache words Daniel could understand well, but she seemed to grasp his tone. After a long moment, she gave the smallest nod, almost too tiny to see. That was enough. Daniel stood, lifted the smallest girl gently into his arms, and carried her to his horse. He placed her on the saddle with care, then helped the others climb up. 2 girls rode together in front of him, leaning weakly against each other. Daniel walked beside the horse, keeping a hand on the reins and another steadying the children. His pace was slow so they wouldn't bounce or slip. The trail back to his ranch felt longer than usual. Several times, one of the younger girls would whimper quietly, a soft sound of fear from the memory of what they had endured. Each time, Daniel spoke reassuringly, letting them know they were safe now. The sun continued its slow descent, painting the land in warm colors as they finally approached Daniel's ranch house. Smoke rose gently from the chimney where Mary, Daniel's sister, was cooking something for supper. She stepped out onto the porch when she heard hoofbeats, expecting to see Daniel alone. Her eyes widened when she saw the children. Daniel, what happened? She asked, her voice full of concern. Trouble in the grove, he said simply. They need help. Mary didn't ask anything more. She rushed down the steps and immediately began helping him lift the girls from the horse. She spoke gently, guiding them inside, offering water, blankets, and warm seats near the hearth. Daniel watched quietly as Mary comforted the children. The oldest girl looked around the small ranch house with uncertainty but not fear. She seemed to understand now that she and the others were safe. Daniel stepped outside again for a moment, letting the cool air wash over him. He looked toward the cottonwood grove in the distance. He didn't know who had left the girls there or why, but one thing was certain. He had arrived exactly when he was needed. He whispered to himself, "They're safe now. That's what matters." Then he went back inside to help his sister and make sure the girls had everything they needed. Daniel stayed near the doorway for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the warm glow inside the ranch house. Mary had already moved quickly, setting out blankets on the long wooden bench and placing a pot of warm soup on the table. The girls sat close together, tired but calmer now that they were out of the cold air and the lonely grove. A gentle fire crackled in the stone fireplace, filling the room with soft orange light. Mary knelt beside the smallest girl and spoke in a soothing voice. "It's all right, sweetheart. You're safe here. No harm will come to you." She spoke slowly, using simple words, knowing the children might not understand English well. Even so, the tone itself communicated warmth and kindness. The oldest girl, the one Daniel believed was their leader, watched everything carefully. She seemed protective of the younger ones, keeping an arm around two of them at all times. Her dark eyes moved from Mary to Daniel and back again, trying to understand these strangers who were helping them so gently. When Mary offered her a bowl of soup, she hesitated only for a moment before accepting it. She tasted it cautiously, then nodded to the younger girls, signaling that it was safe to eat. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, admiration for the child's bravery and responsibility. She was just a girl, but she carried herself like someone far older, someone who understood survival, fear, and leadership. When everyone had eaten, Mary began preparing a place for them to sleep. She unrolled soft blankets on the floor near the fireplace and placed extra pillows nearby. The girls watched her, confused at first, then surprised by the level of care they were receiving. Mary smiled warmly and gestured for them to lie down. The youngest ones curled up immediately, exhaustion pulling them into sleep. The older girl stayed awake a bit longer, her eyes on Daniel. She seemed to be trying to read him, to understand whether he truly meant no harm. Daniel simply nodded at her, silently promising that he wasn't a threat. After a moment, she lay down too, though her eyes remained open until they slowly closed, finally giving in to exhaustion. Daniel and Mary stepped quietly into the small kitchen space so their voices wouldn't disturb the girls. "They look so thin," Mary whispered, worry in her voice. "How long do you think they were out there?" Daniel shook his head. "Hard to say. But from the signs on the trail, they were alone for hours. Maybe half a day." Mary leaned against the counter and sighed. "Bringing them here was the right thing. But you know, someone will talk. People always do." Daniel knew she was right. Frontier towns had sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Some settlers didn't understand Apache people and were quick to judge anything involving them. Daniel wasn't afraid for himself, but he didn't want anything to happen that might put the children at risk. "They needed help," he said simply. "That's the only thing that matters." Mary gave him a soft, proud smile. "I knew you'd say that." Hours passed quietly. Daniel spent the time cleaning his saddle, checking the horses, and thinking about what he needed to do next. Helping the girls recover was only half the responsibility. He had to bring them back to their family, and he would have to do it safely. That would not be easy. Apache camps were far into the territory, and misunderstandings between settlers and tribes could happen quickly. He went back inside to check on the girls before he slept. The fire had dimmed to glowing coals, and the room felt peaceful. The oldest girl opened her eyes when he entered. She didn't move, but she watched him. Daniel knelt slowly, keeping a distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we'll get you clean clothes, good food, and when you're strong again, I'll take you home." She blinked slowly, as if trying to translate his words into meaning. Then she raised her hand and tapped her chest lightly. "Lena," she whispered, telling him her name. Daniel smiled softly. "Lena, that's a strong name." He tapped his own chest. "Daniel." Lena nodded. She seemed satisfied. She closed her eyes again, trusting him just a little bit more. The next morning, the ranch was filled with quiet movement. Chickens clucked outside, a soft wind brushed against the wooden walls, and the smell of breakfast filled the air. Lena woke first, sitting up with alert eyes, then gently waking the younger girls one by one. Daniel watched her from a distance, impressed by how gentle yet firm she was with them. It was clear she had taken care of them long before he arrived. Mary served warm bread, boiled eggs, and milk. The girls ate slowly, but gratefully. After breakfast, Mary brought out some of their old clothes, soft shirts, simple dresses, and small boots that once belonged to cousins who had long since outgrown them. The garments were worn but clean and warm. The girls hesitated at first, unsure if they should accept them. Mary encouraged them kindly. "These are for you. You can keep them. They'll help keep you warm." The younger girls smiled timidly as they tried on the new clothes. Lena accepted hers with quiet gratitude. Even though the clothes weren't from their culture, she recognized the kindness behind the gesture. Daniel knew it was time to make a plan. He stepped outside and saddled 2 horses, his strong brown mare, and a calm old gelding that was perfect for carrying supplies. He packed blankets, food, a water jug, and an extra coat. Mary came out to check on him, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're really going to take them back, aren't you?" she asked softly. "I have to," Daniel said. "Their families must be frantic right now. And if the girls stay here too long, someone in town might start trouble." Mary nodded. She understood. But worry lingered in her eyes. "Just be careful. The Apache don't always trust settlers. And settlers don't always trust Apache. If anything happens, promise you'll think before acting." Daniel smiled gently. "I always do." Inside the house, the girls were finishing breakfast. When Daniel returned, Lena stood up almost immediately. She seemed to understand what was coming next. He knelt again, showing her a small map he had drawn the night before, simple shapes representing mountains, rivers, and trails. "We go here," he said softly, pointing toward the region where Apache tribes were known to travel. "Your home, your people. I'll take you." Lena's eyes brightened, and she nodded quickly. Even the smallest one, who had barely spoken since arriving, gave him a shy smile. Before leaving, Mary packed a small basket of food for the journey. She hugged each girl gently, though the children stood stiffly at first, unaccustomed to such displays of affection from strangers. But Mary's warmth slowly eased their nerves. Daniel lifted the 2 youngest girls onto the old gelding and wrapped a blanket around them. The middle 2 sat behind him on his mare, holding onto his coat. Lena walked beside him at first, her hand resting on the horse for balance. But after a little while, Daniel helped her climb up to sit in front of him, so she wouldn't tire herself out. The trail stretched long ahead of them, winding through open fields and scattered trees. The journey would take at least a day, maybe 2, depending on the girls' strength and any unexpected obstacles. Daniel walked beside the horse whenever he could, keeping watch on every direction. A few hours into the journey, they passed near the edge of town. Some settlers were working outside their homes and paused when they saw Daniel leading a horse full of Apache children. Curiosity and whispers rose immediately. A few men exchanged uneasy looks. One woman clutched her child closer. Daniel didn't stop. He didn't explain. He didn't owe them a story. But he felt Lena tense slightly in front of him, sensing the unfriendly atmosphere. "They don't know you. They don't know what happened. What matters is getting you home." Lena looked up at him and nodded, though her eyes held uncertainty. Once they passed the town's edge, the tension eased. Open land greeted them again, peaceful and wide. The younger girls began pointing at birds, clouds, and distant hills, their voices soft but curious. They were beginning to feel a bit like children again, instead of frightened survivors. Daniel stopped near a small creek at midday to let everyone rest. The girls splashed cool water on their faces and drank from the stream. Lena sat beside Daniel, watching him slowly whittle a small piece of wood. Maybe she found comfort in the quiet rhythm of it. Maybe she simply wanted to stay near someone who had already proven himself gentle. After a few minutes, she pointed toward the mountains ahead and said a single word, "Home." Daniel nodded. "We'll get there, I promise." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Daniel realized something important. In just one day, these children who had been strangers had begun to trust him. Their fear had softened into hope. Their silence had changed into small smiles, curious gestures, and tiny glimmers of relief. And Daniel felt something inside himself shift too. Helping these girls felt right. More right than anything he had done in a long time. The journey was only beginning. But he was ready for whatever came next. The sun was halfway down the sky when Daniel and the 5 Apache girls continued their slow journey deeper into Apache territory. The land around them began to change. The fields became wider, the hills taller, and the air felt different, quieter, heavier, as if carrying stories of people who walked this land long before any ranch or town existed. Daniel kept a steady pace, making sure the horses didn't tire and the girls stayed comfortable. Every few minutes, he looked back at them. The youngest 2 were wrapped in blankets, sitting safely on the old gelding. The other 3 rode with him on his mare, holding onto his coat whenever the trail bumped or turned. Lena sat directly in front of him, her small hands resting on the saddle horn. She watched the changing land carefully, as if searching for familiar signs. Daniel admired her alertness. Even though she was young, she had the awareness of someone used to surviving difficult situations. But under that strength, he could see something softer, beginning to return hope, maybe, or the relief of knowing she was going home. After some time, Daniel noticed Lena's gaze shift toward a distant ridge. She leaned slightly forward, squinting her eyes, trying to recognize something. Daniel followed her line of sight, but saw nothing unusual. Just more rocks, more bushes, more empty land, stretching under the warm sky. "What do you see?" he asked softly. Lena didn't answer with words. She simply pointed again, then tapped her chest twice, a sign he had learned meant something like, "mine," or "our people." Even if he couldn't see what she saw, he trusted her instincts. As they continued, the younger girls began talking in soft voices, their words light, like whispers of excitement. One of them tugged gently at Daniel's coat and pointed toward a hawk circling above. Daniel smiled and nodded. He didn't know their language, but he understood their meaning. The world around them was beginning to feel safe again. Still, the journey wasn't without challenges. The trail grew rougher, and the horses sometimes slipped slightly on loose stones. Daniel always made sure to place himself between the horses and the steep edges of hillsides, ready to steady anyone if needed. The girls, sensing his carefulness, grew more relaxed. By late afternoon, they found another narrow creek, a perfect place to rest. Daniel helped each girl down from the horses, one by one. The smallest girl clung to his sleeve for a moment, before letting go. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Trust didn't come easily for frightened children. Yet, they trusted him. The girls drank from the creek, splashing their faces, letting the cool water refresh them. Daniel filled the water jug and offered pieces of dried bread and apples Mary had packed that morning. The children ate quietly, sitting close together on a flat rock. Lena sat a little apart from the others but kept her eyes on them, making sure they were all right. Daniel sat on a fallen log nearby, carving another small piece of wood. He didn't make anything special, just simple shapes. It was a habit he used to calm his mind. Lena watched the carving knife move gently through the wood, her interest clear. After a moment of hesitation, she picked up a small stick and tried to copy his hand movements. Her cuts were tiny and uneven, but she kept trying. Daniel chuckled softly. "You're doing good," he said. Lena looked up, shy but pleased, then continued working on her stick. Soon, the younger girls joined her, each trying to carve simple patterns into their own sticks. The moment felt peaceful, almost like something normal, something children should experience rather than the fear they had endured. After their break, Daniel helped everyone back onto the horses, and they continued the journey. As the sky began turning orange, Lena suddenly straightened on the saddle. Her body went still, her eyes focused on something far ahead. Daniel felt her tense, slightly, under his arm. "You see something?" he asked. She nodded quickly. Her hand pointed toward a narrow valley ahead. Daniel stared in that direction, but saw nothing, except brush and rock. Then he heard it. A faint sound, distant, but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. More than one horse. The sound echoed between the hills, carried by the wind. Daniel stopped walking. The horses pricked their ears, sensing something too. The girls grew quiet. Even the youngest ones felt the change in the air. "Stay calm," Daniel murmured. If it was an Apache scouting party, they might think he had taken the girls. If it was outlaws, he would need to protect them. And if it was settlers, well, things could get complicated fast. But Daniel wasn't the type to panic. He stood in front of the horses, hands loose at his sides, mind focused. The hoofbeats grew louder. Lena gripped the saddle horn tightly. She wasn't scared, she was hopeful. Daniel could feel that hope from how she leaned forward, her eyes wide, searching the valley opening. Then shadows appeared on the ridge. Riders. 5, 6, maybe 7 figures on horseback. They moved fast, precise, like men who knew the land well. Their silhouettes against the orange sky were sharp and strong. Daniel saw long hair, bows across their shoulders, and traditional Apache clothing. It was them. The scouting party. Lena gasped softly, not in fear, but in recognition. Her whole body pulled forward, her hand lifting as if reaching toward the familiar sight. The riders slowed when they spotted Daniel and the children. The leader raised his hand sharply, signaling the others to stop. Dust drifted around their horses as they came to a halt. The air grew heavy, the land silent except for the gentle wind. Daniel stepped away from his horse, moving slowly so no one would misunderstand his actions. He kept his hands open and visible. He didn't call out. He didn't move fast. He let the Apache warriors see that he was not a threat. The leader rode forward a few steps, studying Daniel with dark, sharp eyes. His face carried strength and caution. Daniel recognized him not personally, but by reputation. He had seen this man at a distance before, a respected figure among the Apache, known for his fairness and fierce protection of his people. Lena suddenly slid down from the saddle before Daniel could stop her. She ran straight toward the riders. "Lena!" Daniel reached out instinctively, but then stopped. She wasn't running out of fear. She was running out of joy. The Apache leader dropped from his horse in one swift motion. Lena crashed into him, hugging him tightly. He wrapped his arms around her, closing his eyes in relief. The other girls followed, running into the arms of waiting family members. Cries of recognition filled the valley soft, emotional words in their own language. The younger girls clung to their parents and older brothers, tears of relief streaking their dusty faces. Daniel stood back, letting the reunion happen without interruption. He had done his part. Seeing the girls safely in the arms of their families made every mile worth it. After long moments of embracing, the Apache leader lifted Lena into his arms and walked toward Daniel. Lena's hand rested on the man's shoulder, but she reached her other hand toward Daniel, wanting him included somehow. The leader stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on Daniel. They were intense, but not hostile. He placed Lena on the ground gently and stepped forward. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then the leader touched his hand to his chest, a gesture of respect. Daniel nodded and placed his hand on his own chest in return. The leader spoke in slow, careful English. "You brought them home," Daniel answered just as gently. "They needed help." The leader studied him, as if weighing his character with his eyes alone. Then he gestured toward the girls, happily reunited with their families. "You protected what we could not see. This is honor." Daniel said nothing. Respect didn't need many words. Lena returned to his side and touched his arm lightly. Her eyes were glowing with gratitude. She said something in her language. Daniel didn't understand it, but he understood her heart. She was saying thank you, in the purest way a child could. The Apache leader placed a hand on Lena's head fondly, then looked at Daniel again. Tonight, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. You come, eat, rest. You are welcome among us. It was not a small thing. It was an offer of trust, rare and meaningful. Daniel looked at the girl's safe, happy home and nodded. I'll come, he said quietly. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the Apache riders guided Daniel and the children toward their camp. The air felt lighter now, filled with relief and new understanding. The journey was nearly over, but something even more meaningful was waiting next. Daniel followed the Apache riders slowly, keeping a respectful distance while the girls stayed close to their families. The path toward the camp was calm, touched by the soft light of evening. Shadows stretched across the land as the sun dipped lower behind the mountains. The air cooled with every step, and the sky turned shades of orange and pink that seemed to paint the world in peace. Lena walked beside her father, holding his hand tightly. Every few steps, she glanced back at Daniel, with a smile so small, yet so full of meaning, that Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest. She no longer looked frightened. She looked home. The group reached a long valley where the Apache camp rested between tall trees and open grass. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the sounds of evening activity filled the air, children laughing, women preparing meals, elders speaking softly. When the returning riders were spotted, people rushed out from their lodges, calling names, searching faces, hoping for the impossible. And then they saw the 5 girls. Cries of joy stirred through the camp. Mothers ran forward, arms open, tears shining in their eyes. The girls quickly found themselves wrapped in deep embraces, comforted by familiar warmth and relieved voices. Even the smallest girl who had clung to Daniel earlier now hid her face in her mother's shoulder, finally allowing herself to relax fully. Daniel stayed slightly away, not wanting to interrupt the reunion. He watched quietly, hands resting at his sides, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude that he had been able to help. He didn't need thanks. Seeing the children safe was enough. But the Apache people noticed him. Eyes turned toward the quiet rancher standing respectfully near his horse. Some watched him with curiosity, others with thoughtful expressions, but none with fear or anger. Not now. Not after what he had done. They saw Lena's hand reaching toward him, pointing, as if telling her family who he was and what he had done. The Apache leader, Lena's father, walked toward Daniel. His steps were slow and steady, filled with dignity. When he reached Daniel, he placed one hand over his heart again. You brought them home, he said, the words spoken with calm strength. For us, that is the greatest gift. Daniel shook his head gently. Anyone would have done the same. The leader's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger, but in disbelief. No, he said. Not anyone. Many men would not stop. Many would fear. Many would turn away. His voice softened. But you did not. Daniel didn't know what to say. Praise made him uncomfortable, especially when he felt he had only done what was right. So, he simply nodded. The leader gestured toward the camp. Come, you are welcome. Daniel followed him toward the large central fire, where several elders sat. The Apache people moved aside quietly, giving space for the meeting. Daniel stood calmly, waiting. A woman, a respected elder by the way, the others looked at her, studied him from across the fire. She then turned to Lena and beckoned her forward. Lena stepped close to her and spoke in soft, quick words. She moved her small hands to describe things. Daniel finding them, Daniel helping them, Daniel protecting them. The elder listened with careful eyes, nodding slowly. When the girl finished, the elder raised her head and looked at Daniel. Your heart is good, she said simply. Your actions will be remembered. Daniel bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect he hoped she understood. As night settled fully over the valley, the Apache people prepared a meal. Hunters brought cooked venison, women served bread made of corn, and children ran between the lodges with bowls of berries. A place of honor was given to Daniel near the fire. Though he tried to refuse out of modesty, they insisted. In their eyes, he was not simply a visitor. He was a man who had returned their lost children. Lena sat near him for most of the meal, her small presence gentle and warm. She pointed to her siblings and cousins and gave their names in her own language. Daniel tried repeating them, and the children laughed softly at his attempts. They weren't mocking him, just amused by the effort. Lena giggled too, covering her mouth shyly. One of Lena's younger cousins sat on Daniel's knee without hesitation, holding a piece of bread and staring at his hat with fascination. Daniel chuckled and placed his hat on the child's head, which earned a round of laughter from the nearby families. It was a simple moment, but a meaningful one, trust between strangers becoming something familiar and human. Later, after the meal, a group of Apache men began to play soft drums. Women hummed in harmony, and children clapped in a loose rhythm. Some people danced slow steps, graceful movements that told stories of tradition and strength. Daniel watched quietly, moved by the beauty of it. At one point, Lena came to him holding a small brown pouch. She placed it gently in his hand, then tapped her chest twice, a gesture of meaning that Daniel didn't fully understand, but he felt it. It was something like, "From me to you," or "My thanks." When he opened the pouch, he found a simple necklace made of woven grass and polished stones. It wasn't fancy, but it carried deep significance. "Lena," he whispered, touched by the gift. She smiled softly and pressed his hand to close the pouch again. Then she pointed to the sky, then to him, then to her heart. Daniel didn't know the exact message, but he recognized the feeling behind it. Her father approached then, standing beside her. "She wants you to know," he said, helping translate her gestures, "that she will remember you for all her life. You saved her. You saved her sisters. This cannot be forgotten." Daniel lowered his eyes, humbled. "I just did what I could." "That," the leader said, "is what makes you honorable." They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. The leader then placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You have our respect. If ever you ride near our lands, you will find safety, food, shelter." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "You are a friend to us." Daniel nodded. "And you have mine," he said softly. For the rest of the evening, he stayed with the Apache families, sharing quiet conversations and gentle moments. He didn't speak their language well, but kindness needed no translation. A young boy showed him how to draw shapes in the dirt. A woman offered him more food. 2 elders asked him about his ranch, pointing at him, miming horses, and smiling when he understood. At some point in the night, Lena fell asleep on her father's lap. Her small hand still held the edge of Daniel's old bandana, something he hadn't even noticed she had taken earlier in the day. Her father smiled and placed the bandana gently around her neck. "She feels safe with you," he said quietly. Daniel looked at the peaceful child and felt a deep, quiet warmth spread through him. As the fire burned lower and the stars brightened above, Daniel knew it was time to head back. He didn't want to disturb anyone, so he went quietly to his horse and began saddling it. But the Apache leader approached him again, with several members of the tribe following. "You go now?" the leader asked. "I should," Daniel said. "My sister will worry if I don't return by morning." The leader nodded. "Then go with peace." Several people stepped forward, offering small gifts. Nothing extravagant, but meaningful. A hand-woven bracelet, a small carved animal, a food pouch for the road. Daniel accepted each gift with respectful nods, humbled by their generosity. Lena woke up and rushed toward him, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist. Daniel froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden hug. Then, he slowly placed his hand on her back, returning the gentle embrace. She looked up at him, her dark eyes shining in the firelight. She said something in her language that sounded soft and heartfelt. Her father translated with a warm smile. She says, "Come visit again." "Lo." Daniel smiled. "I will." He mounted his horse and gave one last look at the people standing around the fire. The Apache leader stepped forward and raised his hand in farewell. The others followed, and Lena placed her fingers over her heart again, a gesture Daniel now understood was more than thanks. It was respect. It was connection. It was friendship. Daniel rode out of the valley slowly, the camp's warm glow fading behind him. The night wrapped around him gently, filled with stars brighter than he had seen in a long time. Every hoofbeat felt lighter. Every breath felt easier. He had set out from his ranch just trying to do the right thing. He returned, having built a bridge between two worlds that rarely understood each other. And he carried with him not only the handmade gifts, but the quiet knowledge that kindness could reach farther than any frontier line ever drawn. As he rode toward home, Daniel whispered to himself, "They're safe. That's all that matters." And the night seemed to agree.